my fellow comic book collectors. Today is going to be a very special interview. In this channel, in this interview series that I've been doing, I've been trying to interview different people, not only collectors, but also people who are interested in, you know, producing comics, making comics of their own. Like, I think of that as being sort of the fan dream, like the comic collector dream of becoming your own creator, make your own comic. Well, today's interview is with such a person. His name is Not Noir, and he is basically a background in graffiti art and graphic design, and he's from New York. And he reached out to me on Instagram, and we became friends. And without further ado, I'm going to just bring him in, and he should be pretty. He's a very interesting guy. So one sec here, let me bring him in. There we go. Hey,
Hey, how's it going?
good, good.
First things first.
Oh, comic collector. Oh, many
Happy
happy.
50.
Oh, happy 50. Wow, that's cool. I'm viewing this on my cell phone, so it's always very small. So I'm like zooming in my face. So yeah, so thank you. Yeah, you were there for my live stream birthday party.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, so
Just
yes,
randomly happened to be there.
yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So what was I gonna say? Yeah, so obviously you came from the comic book industry, like because you were a collector first, right? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I started as a Marvel zombie when I was about 4 or 5. The Incredible Hulk literally taught me how to read. I went to a Catholic nursery school,
or
preschool, and in New York City, in Queens, New York.
mhm.
And I was so the nuns made me so uptight about reading comics because you
I
didn't
was
want to get
thinking
caught.
they wouldn't like the comics too much.
No, no, no. So it was a Saturday, and I was walking with my mom in the neighborhood, a Saturday, and we were by the church area, and I was so scared that the nun would see me because I had a comic book with me. I was so worried they were gonna criticize me for reading a comic because in preschool that just wasn't accepted. I remember very vividly having my first comics related argument also in this period of time. It was something like who would win, Mighty Mouse or Superman?
Oh, totally Mighty Mouse.
Of course, of course. But yeah, I just went on that trajectory for a while. I moved to another part of Queens, New York, and then there was a really great old-fashioned comic book shop called Mike's Comic Hut right on Northern Boulevard in Flushing, Queens. And I can't tell you how many hours we spent over there.
Oh,
At that point, the Avengers was my obsession.
so that's cool. That's cool. So you're very Marvel oriented. I was more of a DC
Yeah.
guy when I first started for some reason.
Well, what? I didn't get into DC until I was in my 20s, and I
Mhm.
think it was probably mostly Kingdom Come kind of made me see like, oh my God, like Superman really is like this archetype of like a Christ-like figure, and that really spoke to me,
It,
and I love how Mark Waid and Alex Ross really tried to emphasize how Superman was the literal, the only person in that particular story who could save the world. He had to come back from his self-imposed retirement, and
mhm.
spoiler alert, he leaves Metropolis because the Joker does something terrible, and 10 years later he's got to come back and save the world, and that Kingdom Come really spoke to me. And then in my 20s I kind of became a DC guy, but
Mhm.
always been mostly Marvel. Make mine Marvel.
Cool, cool. I mean, yeah, I mean, Marvel has lots of great characters. So, what? How did you get into graffiti art, though? Like, how does that? Like, how does it
Oh,
all connect?
well, it's so funny. It's like my life is like going from one subculture to another. It's like here I'm a little kid riding my bike, buying comics, and middle school, and then next thing I know, it's like I'm like 13 or 14 or 15, and I'm I'm in a new high school, like my first year of high school, and at that point in the late '80s, everybody was doing graffiti.
Mhm.
Everybody was doing graffiti. It didn't matter if they were good or bad or somewhere in the middle. It just seemed like at that particular point in time, in Queens, New York, and I'm sure in most other parts of New York, most of the males did graffiti. They had a tag, which is the
Yeah, yeah,
name
yeah.
for your fake name,
Hmm.
but it was so interesting. So I just kind of gravitated towards the graffiti thing and got pretty deeply into that. And then a couple of years later, I got into underground music, and
Hmm.
but comics were always on the periphery. It's like, of course, later on I would get more into like independent stuff. Like I was obsessed with Yummy Fur. That was like my favorite independent
That's
comic
sort of funny.
for of all time.
That's
But it's just always been a part of whatever artistic thing I do. Comics have always been on the periphery. I've
that's cool.
never I've never not thought.
When you were doing your
Go ahead.
tagging, did it have a comic feel to it, or?
Oh, everybody was highly influenced by comics. I mean, you could look at old whole cars from the '70s and early '80s. You could see so many of those pioneers of graffiti were so influenced by Jack Kirby, and
Oh,
just that cosmic style, and it's totally bleeds into one another. Absolutely.
oh wow, that's cool. That's cool. I never really liked graffiti. I know that there are some professional levels of graffiti, but yeah, I don't know. I just maybe
It's an acquired taste.
it's an acquired taste. I'm sort of maybe because I was raised in a small town. It's kind of like
Hmm.
graffiti was seen as not a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So
it's so interesting because I think when you do grow up in a smaller area, it would kind of be seen as like, well, you can't write on, Joe's store because Joe.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas when you're in a large anonymous city, it's so much easier when you're a kid to just say, "Oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to paint,
Hmm.
wherever they won't allow me to, I'll go out and paint, and I'll crush and I'll destroy
Hmm.
anything that I can with spray paint, because there is that anonymity and you don't really know anybody when you live in a big city, or that's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
my
You're not
experience.
connected to those people in ways.
Yeah,
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 I
yeah,
get it. Yeah.
definitely.
So you when we talked before, you mentioned that when you were doing graffiti, you actually created some characters as well.
Yeah, yeah. The first time I was obsessed with, later on, this is like late 20s, no, early 20s. I got obsessed with David Lynch and Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet. He was my favorite film
Hmm.
director. I just was obsessed with him. And I think sort of like I was looking to come up with some interesting characters. This is like 1991. And at that point, another kind of subculture I kind of got into. I was very interested in like independent film, and that's what I studied in college. I studied film and video. So I was looking for interesting concepts to turn into short films or whatever. And one day I just came up with these two characters, which eventually turned into four. And by 2017, they would turn into, practically a whole story that I concocted. But the first two characters were, well, the first character was the Cosmos, and the Cosmos originally looked like uh, looked like trees, a circle of trees, but they were connected with like rocks, like almost like a opaline kind of stone kind of connective tissue, and they were circular,
Hmm.
and they were called the Cosmos, and I think that was clearly, I was looking at a lot of David Lynch back then, and I think the trees just kind of melted into my influence, and I said, "Oh, let me see if I could do something with this wooden concept." I've always been very interested in wood. So I came
Hmm.
up with this character called Cosmos. And at first they were kind of like, they were like a world-ending presence that would show up on your planet, and it was almost like I was trying to come up with my own Galactus sort of mythology.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If the Cosmos shows up on your planet, oh boy, all bets are off. And then at the same time, I came up with sort of the foil of the Cosmos, were these creatures called the Helidipus, and they're very interesting. They kind of look like a deep sea angler, if you could
Yeah,
if you could
those fish
imagine.
with the
Yeah,
little light on
yeah,
the. I love
yeah,
that
yeah,
fish. That's my favorite fish.
yeah, yeah. and I wanted to come up with a character that would be like the underdog and people could root for, but they were definitely ugly. They were definitely unhuman. So like you really
Mhm.
had to like open up your heart and say to myself, can I really like be into a totally non-human character? So I
Mhm.
found that like that was my challenge. So you have the Cosmos versus the Helodiphus, and then these concepts just sort of stayed in my mind for so many years. I would doodle them, and then life happened, and then more life happened, and then all the way up until 2016 is when I finally started doing art again. I started spray painting again. I needed some sort of a creative output, so that's when I really started doing a lot of art on my Instagram and graffiti and mostly legal graffiti, but sometimes I put up a sticker or two. Um, but
Hopefully
these two
nobody's watching
characters
this
were,
that
yeah, nobody's watching, nobody's watching. But these two characters, the Cosmos and the Helodiphus, were just characters that I knew I wanted to do something with, and then I started coming up with other characters. Most notably, the Grenahash, which is like I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's totally influenced by my obsession with the swamp like
like
archetype. The
yeah,
swamp
swamp
thing, man
thing, man
thing.
thing, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But when you said the
of course.
tree thing, I thght, oh, it's kind of got that swamp thing a little bit
Yeah,
there
yeah.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very into or like anything organic and wood and
Hmm.
but for a while I was just obsessed with drawing swamp creatures, and that's how I came up with this race of swamp creatures called the Grenahash. And then I had a bunch of other characters and I was drawing them on my Instagram, and I would sometimes paint them on a wall, and then eventually my wife said to me in like 2020 or 2021, she's like, you need to do a comic book because, like you have all these characters, and you're always like saying that you want to do something. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. My I was painting so much that my shoulder just got shredded from always doing that motion of the
Oh
spray
yeah, yeah, I
can.
can
So
imagine.
so sometimes if I would paint on a Sunday, I would be in pain all week because my shoulder would be so messed up.
Hmm.
So it was a very easy transition for me to not paint as much as I used to. And then last summer, starting in on or about June, I just said to myself, I'm off all summer, thankfully. So I'm gonna literally teach myself how to draw and write a comic. So of course I knew I was going to use my strange alien creatures.
Hmm.
By that point, I had basically concocted this whole mythology behind, the hierarchy of the cosmos. Of course, are these incredibly evil baddies, and they have all their henchmen and fighting on the side of freedom and equality is the Helodiphus, who are just a real butt ugly species that looks not unlike an anglerfish. They kind of have
Hmm.
like an ass for a head, pardon my language. And so I knew they were like the ultimate underdog. And I just said to myself, I want to tell this story. I have about 12 issues in me. And I wanted to tell this story. It was just
So
like
is it
it
one of
was
those
like
stories with the full arc, like where it's like where it's a full complete story, or how does it work?
Oh yeah, I call the comic is called McKinley Alpha because I had to figure out what their planet was going to be called. I mean, originally I was like, well, maybe they live on different planets, but I figured it was going to be easier for the story if they all live on one planet and they're kind of vying for territory and resources, and of course the baddies are really bad and they're always oppressing and getting into civil wars with the good guys. So
Mhm.
it's a very oh, but to answer your question, yes, I do clearly know where I want to go. Number one was just released a couple of weeks ago. Number two is done. I'm crowdfunding for that right now. And right now I'm penciling a zero issue, which is going to kind of fill in the blanks of, kind of what happened before, how they
Mhm.
got into this, I call it the age-old conflict. How did they wind up being these mortal enemies on this strange planet called McKinley? And, as a homage to Marvel, of course, my comic is called McKinley Alpha. So at some point, there's of course going to be a McKinley Omega. So you could look out for that.
Cool, cool. So yeah, so how would we show some of the book so that people get a sense of what what the artwork looks like, and
Oh,
maybe a
sure.
little bit of the story. So I want to make you
Um,
big, I guess.
yeah.
Here,
Let me turn around. That's gonna not be good. Back in my chair.
wait, no, how do I do this? No, I'm trying to make you the primary person here.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, wrong. Grab the wrong one.
Okay, wait. If I do that, wait, solo layout. Is that you?
Oh, cool. Yep,
Yeah,
got it.
there we go.
Okay, so this is my book. This is my first issue. I taught myself how to draw it. I taught myself how to write it. Well, I knew how to write stories, but um, it's black and white. It's the first thing that I've self-published in 30 years. So the first thing I'll say is, it's really been a labor of love, and I'll just show the first page. Um, on the first page, on the bottom panel, you could see I have a homage to the creation of the Secret Wars planet. You could see that bottom panel is
Hmm.
clearly a homage to the creation of the Secret Wars #1 world, and it's on these opening pages where we talk about the endless cycle, age-old agitation, and then on the top page, we sort of get a hint as to how the cosmos were created. And you could see they are sort of made of wood, and there's some energy in the middle. And we could see there's like invisible hands sort of creating them. And later on, you'll get the whole backstory of how they were created. And then on the bottom panel here, you could see that you see another one of the characters. That's the Coswatish, which is sort of our angelic benefactors on the planet McKinley. So, and in my world of McKinley, I have not only monsters and aliens, but there's angels and there's all sorts of stuff going on this planet. And just to show you one of my favorite characters, just show you the Grenahash, which are the uh, swamp creatures
Oh,
that
that's
are
really cool
not
looking.
just yeah, that's they are basically an entire swamp-like swamp creature species, and they're when eventually the book is color, they'll be all various shades of green, but they are very because they're from nature and of nature, they are definitively good guys because they're very in tune with the planet. So
Mhm.
they're one of the good guys, and they always fight against the cosmos, and they're made of they're made of vegetable matter and wood and grass and all that kind of swamp monster stuff. So they're a really interesting character. I love to think about what I could do with these characters because I have a good assortment of really bizarre, weird alien species. They're all on this planet, and the fun is, who's going to win? Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? Um, I'm very interested in talking about freedom and liberty,
Mhm.
and Lord knows, the last 3 years has given us a lot to contemplate in terms of
Yeah,
what are
freedom and
we
liberty is
what
something we lack
yeah
here now.
yeah, like what, you totally, I mean, not to get, controversial or anything, but just the general issue, I think, for all of us is we all have to kind of say to ourselves, like, what, how much of my freedom am I willing to give up for other people? So
Mhm.
it's just always this issue of, for the greater good and individual
Mhm.
rights and all that kind of
Right, yeah.
stuff. So I really wanted to explore that stuff because
Mhm.
COVID definitely, uh, COVID was, COVID was,
Put a lot of questions in
uh,
people's minds, I imagine.
yeah,
Yeah.
put a lot of questions in people's minds.
Yeah, yeah.
And my thing, when I'm working on a story, Um, I really do like to, unlike a lot of sources, I
Hmm.
really do like to give both sides. Like I really like to be fair because there's definitely some species on this planet that are, much more kind of controlled by other species, and you
Hmm.
kind of ask yourself like, is it when one species gives you really good technology, are you then kind of beholden to them? Do you have to kind of
Hmm.
do what they want you to do? And that's a lot of the questions that I ask in this comic. Um, but it's McKinley Alpha, and hopefully you could share some of my links in the
Oh yeah, yeah,
description.
definitely.
And yeah, and I just I would really love to I'd really love for your audience to check it out. It's definitely not superhero fare, but if you like independent comics, if you like weird surrealist type of independent comics, people have been telling me that my style is has kind of got like a little yummy fur kind of thing going on. It's
Hmm.
definitely informed by independent film and independent comics, and but in the back of the whole thing, like you could see, you have homages to the Marvel universe,
Yeah,
and
you can
and
see
and
that slight Marvel
yeah,
influence, right? Yeah.
yeah. So I'm just like, this is the dream. This is the dream of my life. I've now created my own universe. It's just awesome. It's like,
So
when I think of all the creators I love, it's like I think about David Lynch. Thinking about, he never explains his, he never explains
and
what his films
and it
mean.
don't make sense.
But I think about. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just joking that his movies have a tendency of not making much sense,
Oh, right, right, right.
but
But when I think about David Lynch, I often think to myself like, he's created all these incredible characters and all these incredible situations, and there's a whole mythology to his films, and Twin Peaks
Mhm.
certainly has, it's a
Yeah,
riddle wrapped in an
okay, yeah.
enigma. So that's really kind of what I'm interested in. I'm interested in creating a world, and hopefully people want to hang out in that world and
Mhm.
go on this journey with me. And I really hope your audience will check it out.
Before I let you go, I actually kind of want to just delve into one little aspect, and this is something like I think a lot of people watching my channel, myself included, like in this, how do you go about publishing? How do you go, like, maybe give a little bit of that journey, because
Oh,
I think
sure.
I
Yeah.
think that'd be useful for people, because a lot of
Yeah,
people have the
absolutely.
same dream, like, like get
Yeah,
a
yeah.
comic. Wouldn't that be cool? Have a comic of our own. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll just tell you kind of another part of my story is that I think I alluded to it a little bit. After graffiti and after kind of being, a little kid and reading comic books, I got into underground music, hardcore punk rock. I was
Hmm.
I was hanging out at places like CBGB's and stuff like that, and other clubs in Manhattan. And what I would see is I would see people were putting out their own little homemade magazines. They were called fanzines, as
Yeah.
I'm sure you know.
Yep.
And it would be about music and interviews and photos. So at that point, I decided to make my own. So I actually did put out a fanzine back in the 1989. It was called Right Trash. And then later on, I did 2 issues of that. And then later on, I did actually do a digest size fanzine called
Hmm.
Marching for Trash, and that was sort of an extension of that, and it was much more personal zine. It had personal writing and kind of very melodramatic, typical 18-year-old fare.
Hmm.
That was in
Yeah.
1990, 1991, right around the time of the first Gulf War. So I was freaking out about that,
Hmm.
and so it was at that time when I learned like I could publish a magazine. It's not a big deal. It's, you just do it. You lay it out, and at that point, of course, I was doing X-Acto knives and cutting stuff and using
Hmm.
images from old Life magazines to fill, the
Yeah. Yeah.
dingbats in the
All the guys.
corner and stuff. Yeah. And I was really into that like 1950s aesthetic. And so when I decided to make a comic on under the, because of the suggestion of my wonderful wife Alicia, and I would not be here if not for her. She's the most wonderful, amazing part of my life. But when she was prompting me to make a comic, I just remembered. I said, I can make a comic. I made a magazine. It's not a
Yeah.
big deal. So let me just reteach myself how to do it. So last summer, I laid it out. I made it so hard for myself because I actually drew this I drew this whole thing at this size. So now I know that I could draw it on a bigger piece of paper and
And
reduce
then
it.
you'll
I didn't know
scale.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Usually that's the
now
way to
I'm
do
doing, yeah, yeah. So now I'm doing it correctly, whereas, picture me hunched over doing all the details on this, but
it.
now I know I could take a big piece of paper and do the pencils and the inks and then reduce it. And then as far as getting money for publishing, back in the hardcore fanzine days, we would just, beg, borrow, steal, get
Hmm.
offset printing was much cheaper back then. And we would sell our zines for 50 cents or a buck. So when I got back into it last summer, I knew that it would, I have a couple of places on the internet where I've become, something of a bit character in a bad movie. So I knew I had a couple of fans. So I said, what should I do? Well, let me try to crowdfund it. That's what everybody does. So
Hmm.
I went on Indiegogo in September and I just kind of put in, what the thing was about. But here's how green I am in the comics industry. I'm
Hmm.
so green as a comics creator that I did not know last fall when I did my first crowdfunding on Indiegogo that people basically use Indiegogo and Kickstarter as like the modern day comic shop.
Yep.
They'll go on and they'll look for projects that they're interested in. So I was so green that I didn't even know that like people were actually going to be purchasing the comic from
From the
Indiegogo.
Indiegogo. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I yeah, I like because I did a I had a medical thing a couple of years ago, so I did a GoFundMe, so I just figured like, oh, all my friends are just going to donate to help me make the comic. But
Hmm.
now I know, since I just did my campaign for the second issue, now I know that I'm offering perks now. I have a variant cover. I have patches
You should
and
also offer
stickers, of
original
course.
art and stuff like that, like original
Yeah,
art or
yeah,
sketches that you
that's a
can
good
do.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. But thank you. In our conversation last week, you put this fantastic idea in my head to get someone to do a variant cover. That was a great idea. Thank you so much
Hmm.
for that wonderful idea. So, how did I publish a comic? I just kind of like I just went for it. I just I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I just went for it, and I
And
and
did
I
you just find a
I just
printer that would be willing to print it for
yeah, and
you?
then oh, that was hard. That was really hard because I went and I Googled, printers and back when I was a kid, it's like every corner had a copy shop and it's like that's
Yeah.
just a relic of the past. So I wanted to find a really good offset printer, and after doing a lot of rigmarole with a lot of different companies, I finally found a good printer in Nashville, Tennessee. And
Oh,
I think the book came out beautiful. Um, it's black and white. It's exactly like if you're a hardcore kid, or if you collected fanzines back in the day. My first issue is exactly this, like a fanzine from the 90s, like that
yeah,
that
yeah.
it's got the same aesthetic, the same, so I'm really interested in sort of incorporating that into my au revoir of like, I was a hardcore kid. I'm also a comics fan. I'm also, huge into independent film. Even though that's not really a term anymore. But
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm a huge film buff. I'm a huge comics fan. I just there's not much pop culture that I don't love, to be perfectly honest. So I'm just trying to incorporate all of these different strings into what I'm doing. And I think when you read my stuff, you'll see little references. You'll be like, oh, isn't that line from Goodfellas?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I love to drop those little pop culture
Oh,
references
yeah,
in
yeah,
my
yeah.
in my dialogue.
Cool, cool. So yeah, so all the links to your Indiegogo and to your Instagram, I'm going to put into the description. So I definitely
Oh, thank you
recommend
so much.
people to go over, support the guy, support, like, we gotta support each
Yeah,
other, people.
I'd
So
really
go over there,
appreciate it.
support him.
I really appreciate it. I almost feel like I shouldn't say this, but I know because I've gotten a lot of good notes back from people, but I know my first issue is not the best. It's not the worst. It's somewhere in
Mhm.
the middle.
Yeah.
I really put a lot of love and labor into it, But I know that if you give me a shot, you'll see in my second issue, there's a tremendous amount of artistic growth, and the stuff I'm penciling now is going to be even better. So you're basically, if you'll give me a shot, if you'll follow me and check out my work, I guarantee you, you're going to see an artist that is, rapidly becoming, a crushing force in this industry, and I'm looking
Cool,
forward
cool.
to just growing and effectiveness, and just coming up with some really cool stuff. Oh, and just one more thing. One thing that somebody said to me a week ago, and this guy he didn't really like my book. He said like, "Oh, it's not really my cup of tea." I was like, "Okay, all right, I get it." It's
Mhm.
not everybody's cup of tea. It's much more like an it's definitely an
It's
independent comic
independent. Yeah,
as
yeah.
opposed to. So he said, but he gave me the greatest compliment. He said the art is amazing, and it reminds me of Earl Otis, the original Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah, yeah,
creature
you were
creator.
saying, yeah.
Yeah, and like that was like that just like flew me to the roof, because like I was so into that D&D art, like back in the day, and
Mhm.
for to get a compliment like that from somebody who didn't even like the book, I was on cloud nine. So I love that. That was great.
Well, I actually do like the art style. Tell you the truth, I like it. I think it's quite. I like. I've always liked an art style where there's like really the details in the different panels. I always thought that was kind of cool. I find nowadays most comics don't have that. To tell you the truth,
Hmm.
they might have the character in the foreground, but the background is just there's nothing there.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah,
weak. So
yeah,
I
and
do
and another
appreciate
another thing.
the details.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said I just do appreciate the details that are you're putting
Oh,
into each
thanks. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry for mentioning another channel, but I got to give a shout out to the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, because if you're
okay.
trying to get into comics, just subscribe to that channel. They will totally help you if you're trying to break into this industry. Some of the information they've given me is so indispensable, and it's helped me with my art and helped me with my stories. So Cartoonist Kayfabe is a great first stop if you're interested in making comics,
Yeah,
and
I've
and
heard
and
of
that's
that
what
channel.
they.
I haven't really watched much of their stuff, but I've heard of them. But
Great channel, great channel. Not as great as yours, but another great channel.
that's debatable. But okay. But yeah, so thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so
And
much.
yeah, we'll keep in touch on Instagram, and we'll have to do like when you're going to put this maybe second episode out, or second issue out. We will do the we'll have a repeat maybe,
Absolutely,
part
absolutely.
two.
Yeah, and I'll design some stuff so it's not me holding a piece of paper in front of the camera. That would probably be
Yeah, yeah,
better,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Something big, so we can really
Yeah,
see.
yeah,
So that'll be
yeah.
cool.
I'm very low tech. I'm very low tech.
That's okay. We all are. Okay, so thanks again.
Thank you
And
so much, Alan. I really appreciate it. It's so nice to, I was DMing a lot of people, and you're one of the people that wrote me back, and that really means a lot. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
oh, no problem, no problem. So again, check out Not Noir on Instagram and on Indiegogo. I'll put the links in the description. Check them out, support them, help the guy out. Like this, we gotta help other comic guys. We gotta help build the industry. That's what we are. We are comic geeks at the end of the day. So thanks
Absolutely.
again for everyone for watching. Bye for now.
Thanks a lot.